Hello, I'm Alex Willan. I'm an author and illustrator. I have a series of books that star Gilbert the Goblin. The first book was Unicorns Are the Worst, then Dragons Are the Worst, then Yetis Are the Worst, and now I'm here to read the newest one, which is Elves Are the Worst. And you can see on the cover, all the elves are decorating, and they got a little carried away, and they decorated Gilbert and his umbrella. If we open up inside, we see some wrapping paper with some candy canes on it. And then inside we see Gilbert hanging his stocking. We see the title, Elves Are the Worst, by me, Alex Willan. We see his friend Chicken carrying some more decorations, and we see a little sock slug from the previous books. And Gilbert starts by saying, "You know, goblins are an important part of many celebrations throughout the year," as he points to his calendar. Like Pigeon Plucking Day. We see Gilbert chasing after a pigeon. Or the Great Sock Slug Race. We see Gilbert dressed as a referee as the sock slugs race to the finish. And of course, Taco Tuesdays. We see Gilbert dressed in a taco costume. He says, but there's one group of magical creatures that hogs all of the holiday spotlight. Do you know what group that is? Elves! And we see all the elves decorating, getting ready for the holiday, doing some shopping. And we see Gilbert out walking one of his sock slugs and holding up a candy cane. Gilbert says, "Now I know what you're going to say." Here we see Gilbert's drawing of the elves. And it says, "Elves are so hardworking and so perfect. Ho ho hogwash." And we see the drawing up on Gilbert's refrigerator and Gilbert standing next to his to-do list. And he says, "We goblins are just as hardworking as any elf." Why, just today, I watered all my plants, and we see Gilbert attempting to water his plants, but they seem to be putting up a bit of a fight. Caught up on some of my knitting, and we see Gilbert knitting a scarf, orange and blue, just like his outfit. And made another attempt at perfecting my brambleberry pie recipe. And we see Gilbert next to the pie, which doesn't look like it turned out very well. And I still had time to develop a new spell that turns candy canes into kitty canes. Don't tell anyone, but the magic word is ooble kadooble. Meanwhile, elves spend all their time hanging out inside of trees baking cookies, or pouring bowl after bowl of the world's loudest cereal. We see the elves plugging their ears as the cereal snaps and pops. Or, of course, lounging around on various shelves. Goblins can sit on shelves. And we see Gilbert sitting on the shelf. And then we see Gilbert falling off the shelf. And Gilbert says, "In my defense, that shelf was not structurally sound." And then we see Gilbert standing next to a chalkboard where he's drawn a comparison between goblins and elves. He says, "And don't even get me started on the elves of Santa's workshop. First of all, I think it's pretty clear that they copied my style." He points out that they have similar hats, they both have pointy ears, they both have two eyes. And then over here we see the elves having a slumber party. And he says, "And so what if the elves are always having epic slumber parties?" And then we see Gilbert being chased by Chicken, who's carrying a pillow. He says, "Chicken and I have slumber parties, and while Chicken may get a little too carried away with the pillow fights, we do look awfully cool in our matching PJs." And now we see Gilbert at his sewing machine. I mean, how hard is it to be one of Santa's elves? If you think that a bunch of elves are so perfect, just wait till you see what one amazing goblin can do. And we see Gilbert has made himself an elf disguise, the rim on the hat, the collar, and the belt, and even a little fake nose taped to his face. And he's at the sign that says, "Welcome to the North Pole." So he's going to sneak into the North Pole disguised as an elf. So step one of being an elf. Look after a few flying deer. And we see the elves working together to take care of the reindeer, brushing its fur, cleaning its hooves, giving it some food. And we see Gilbert struggling to hang on as one of the reindeer flies by. Step two, wrap a few boxes. And again, we see all the elves working together to make a little present with the bow on top. And then we see Gilbert getting a little wrapped up. And now we see Gilbert inside Santa's workshop. standing at the conveyor belt as a bunch of toy trains start heading his way. And he says, "Okay, that could have gone better, but I think that I'll more than prove myself in the third and most important step, making the perfect toy." So Gilbert has his hammer and the trains are coming along, and he just has to hammer one wheel onto the train as it goes past. And the first train comes along, Gilbert grabs it, and he says, "See, it's as easy as could." But before he has a chance to finish his thought, the second train came along. He drops his hammer, grabs the second train, and says, "Wait a minute." And then as the third train comes along, his hammer gets carried off on the conveyor belt. And he says, "My hammer!" And then by the time the fourth train comes along, Gilbert's gotten his collar caught in the conveyor belt. And he goes, "Oh no, my collar!" And Gilbert trips backwards, stumbles over one of the trains, and yells, "Oh no!" He falls against one of the trees, saying, "I'm going down!" And he knocks the tree into the bench, which throws the bowl of candy canes up into the air, and Gilbert shouts the magic words, "Ooble Kadooble!" And do you remember what that magic spell does? It turns all the candy canes into adorable kitty canes. So Gilbert is surrounded by kitty canes, and he's made quite the mess, and his disguise has come undone. This kitty cane's even playing with his fake nose, and he's confronted by the elves. And Gilbert says, "Okay, so maybe an elf's job is harder than it looks." And we see the elves helping Gilbert to his feet. And they're pointing to a sign that says, "Elves believe in the power of toys," TOYS, which stands for Teamwork Optimizes Your Success. And Gilbert says, "And it turns out, elves aren't perfect. They're just really good at working together as a team." And we see the elves working with Gilbert to put the tree back together. And we see that the elves have worked with Gilbert to make the perfect toy train. And Gilbert says, "Now that's more like it." And then we see all of them working together with Gilbert back at his house. And he says, "We even teamed up together to work on my brambleberry pie recipe." Which, what do you think? I think the brambleberry pie turned out a lot better when Gilbert tried it on his own. He says, "A recipe which in the end turned out to be perfect for sharing." And we see Gilbert with all of his friends from the previous books. The dragons, some unicorns, a yeti, a kitty cane and a sock slug, and of course chicken. And we see that some of them are wearing the gifts that Gilbert knitted for them. And Gilbert's opening a present, and he says, "And who cares if I wasn't good at the whole toy making thing? I don't really like toys that much anyway." Gilbert opens up the box to find a little plush version of himself dressed as an elf. And the note says, "For our honorary elf, keep up the hard work. Merry Christmas from the elves. P.S. We love the kitty canes." And Gilbert says, "On second thought," as he snuggles into bed with his new favorite toy, and a certain somebody is flying away in the background. The end. And we see that even on the wrapping paper, the candy canes have transformed into kitty canes. And that's my newest book, Elves Are the Worst. I really hope you enjoyed it, and bye!